I don't know how to give an introduction to myself. All I can say is that I've been, as an activist, this is my 50th year as a participant in struggle. Okay, I started off supporting the sit-in movement out of here in Philadelphia. My first demonstration was at 52nd and Market, right? And I guess I was 18, going on 19. And I had been groomed or primed, right, by my father. I moved with my father when I was 16. He was active in the NAACP. He was a supporter of Robert F. Williams, the Robert F. Williams faction, who believed in armed self-defense if necessary, inside the NAACP. Of course, that faction didn't win, but they were pretty big all over, the country inside of the NAACP. And so, yes, go ahead. And so, when the sit-in movement broke out on February 1st, 1960, as one who had been taught most of my life by either my uncles or my father and elders in the community, I felt that I needed to help try to liberate our people. And so, I became a participant. And I went on to school at Central State College in Wilberforce, Ohio, and continued to be a participant. We were I think it wasn't a branch. It might have been a branch of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. I'm not sure. We eventually organized a chapter of CORE on campus, but there were students already demonstrating, and because we could only go to this bowling alley on Wednesdays nights. I never understood why that, and we couldn't go in the rest of the week. And from there, became active in student politics, and was elected the NSA, the National Students Association coordinator, and formed a SDS chapter, helped form SDS chapter, and SDS was the Students for Democratic Society. It was just forming, and from there we got involved in, I guess, campus politics, or a struggle against, an administrator who, was very reactionary, and that led to a vocal struggle, because we didn't have any arms, against the he brought the Ohio State Patrol on campus. That led to an awareness, and RAM was formed. I was just one of many. And, you know, when this incident occurred, it woke up everybody. So RAM took over the student body, and some of us decided to go back home and see what we could do. And I returned to Philadelphia and ran into several people. One was Stan Daniels, who had a group, Philadelphia Action Committee, which had dissolved. And then another was Ethel Azalea Johnson, who had lived next door to Robert Williams. And a sister who had been in RAM, transferred to Temple. Her name was Wanda Marshall. And RAM, you know, started in Philadelphia. It eventually spread, and so I guess the rest is history, you know. And we worked with SNCC, Stokely Carmichael, and Jamil H. Rap Brown, you know, in the early formation of the Black Panther Party, and, you know, the rest is history, you know.
Okay. Question just for the listeners, because again, you know, you hear when we talk about 60s movements, things of that nature, unfortunately, a lot of folks only know the Black Panther Party. They only know Martin Luther King. They know Malcolm. You know what I'm saying, so on and so forth. And you know, some folks may have heard of Diggins Self-Defense and, you know, a few other formations. A lot of people don't even understand the relevance of SNCC. As far as RAM, as far as the Revolutionary Action Movement, can you kind of give a breakdown as to what it was, the purpose, and also what, if possible, the year of the formation, just for historical purposes?
Well, RAM started in 1963 in Philadelphia, and what we were trying to do was raise the political consciousness of African Americans that we could not achieve total freedom. At that time, people were talking about freedom, justice, and equality under the capitalist system. Right. We worked on issues, you know, from helping the ministers with the selective boycotts to struggling against racism in the construction industry, which still exists, and other issues, local issues. Other groups or other formations picked up on what we were doing, particularly when we mobilized about 30,000 folks in the spring around the Strawberry Mansion construction site. It was a school being constructed in the heart of the African American community, the inner city, the hood, and African American workers were not being hired other than, you know, just some manual labor, picking up some bricks or something like that. And so we blocked the entrance of the white construction workers to stop the, you know, work. And Frank Rizzo, who was a racist police officer, and I think he was maybe a captain at that time, he had a whole section of racist police. All police are not racist, you know, I mean, white or black, you know, but his faction was definitely racist. And they used the flying wedge and, you know, beat Stan and myself, you know, unconscious, and we fought, and they took that footage out of the eyes on the surprised they wouldn't show that, and civil rights, because we were fighting.
Right.
And what happened was we had been known in Philadelphia, and what they did not know was we had relations with Malcolm X, and we called him from the police station. And Malcolm mobilized the whole East Coast to support us. And within a week's time, 30,000 folks, were, like rumbling right down the Strawberry Mansion,
Wow.
So other groups like Herman Ferguson and others picked it up in Queens, New York. Other groups picked it up in Cleveland, Ohio. People were struggling against, racial discrimination over jobs. Right.
Right.
And so it spread, It forced Kennedy to talk about affirmative action in the construction industry.
Okay.
So,
Okay, no, that right there. Now, when you talk about the whole Strawberry Mansion situation, and mobilizing 30,000 folks, why do you think it is that we don't hear about that today? Because, to me, that sounds like something that would be massive, especially when you're talking about, the liberation struggle, and also, as you said, civil rights from a perspective where you're not just, just getting hit upside the head and taking a seat. Why do you think it is that it's not mentioned at all? And why do you think also that groups like the Revolutionary Action Movement aren't on the tongues and the minds of the youth? Why are they being taught? Why isn't it being taught about, by some of these elders?
Because they may get ideas to do something about their condition now. So it's just like when I was in high school, right? In junior high school. When I was in high school, they taught us that we were happy under slavery. That's how ridiculous it was. And we would walk down the street, walking to school. We said, yeah, in no way our ancestors, was happy under slavery. But this is what they would teach. So, they're not going, you cannot expect the system that oppress you to educate you, to liberate you.
Right.
All right. And so they're not gonna give you that. Like they really don't give you the whole history of Martin and Malcolm. Right.
Right.
Martin was in opposition to the United States government. That's what got him killed. He was against, the Vietnam War. He was talking about a Bill of Rights, for poor people, and was going to shut Washington, D.C. down. That's why, they got him before he got to Washington. So,
right.
And so, but they're not going to give you that image of Martin.
Right.
They always give you the image of, I have a dream.
Right.
The same as with Malcolm, all you get is sound bites. But he was talking about an international power structure. Right? And that it's all interconnected. So, had he lived, he would have, he was going to go to Algeria, in another week. All right. And so, he had invited Che Guevara to a meeting. He had Muhammad Babu, who was a revolutionary leader out of Zanzibar there. Che Guevara couldn't come because they were going to, the anti-Castro Cubans were going to shoot a mortar and bomb the place just to kill Che Guevara. So, he couldn't come to Malcolm's meeting. But so Malcolm had evolved into a revolutionary and a nationalist, and so he was talking about the power structure of capitalism, of global capital. Then, this is 1964 and 65. But all you get is by any means necessary. He was, talking much more sophisticated. Okay. And so they do not want young people to realize how sophisticated the Black liberation movement was and is. And that there are many elders, who are still around in every community that they can go and break bread with and, exchange ideas. All right? Exchange ideas. Because we too learn. All right? As elders, if you have any sense, you never stop learning. So we learn from young people as well. And we try to, tell young, or suggest to young people, what to avoid as far as the traps are concerned of what they did before.
Right.
All right. So.
Let me ask
I don't
you
know
this,
if I answered that. Sure.
No, I'm sorry for cutting you. I wanted to ask you, because, so much, and the time is, we can go on for days and days, but, if we had that, if we had that time. But I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned Malcolm several times. Mm-hmm. I was told, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong, that that Malcolm was actually a member of RAM once he left the Nation of Islam. Is that true, or is that just...
no, that's true. That's true. That's true. Okay. Right. Okay. And Grace Lee Boggs alludes to it, and I don't know if I'm, able, to say who suggested, right? But I was sent to New York to recruit Malcolm into RAM. And we sat down. We at 22 West Restaurant. I've written about it, and he said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, I said, "We want you to be our international spokesman." And he said, "Well," and I told him, "We'll give you our documents, and you can break it down, put it in your words," which he did. And he was the best that I've seen of breaking it down, And he said, "Well, it has to be secret because Robert Williams was a fugitive in Cuba at the time, and that he was the international chairman. Robert Williams was the international chairman of RAM." Okay. And he said, "Because I can be indicted, right?" So I think his leadership or his group around him, they figured that they were going to, be indicted eventually and maybe do some time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, they weren't worried about that because most of them had done time before. So but it wasn't until later that Malcolm understood that they were going to kill him. So after his poisoning in Egypt by, he says, this olive kind of guy had been following him around, and they figured out that he was the waiter that slipped him some poison. and he had to, that's why he stayed over there for so long. They pumped his stomach. And they said he had enough poison in him to kill 10 men, but spiritually, I guess, he was, pure and survived, for the length of time that he did. But, he would get up in meetings and he would hold up our journal. He said, this is my journal, Black America. There'll be people outside after it's, selling it. And, people didn't know, and he took it to Africa, with him.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. Good information. I'm online right now while I'm talking to you, and I got folks hitting me up with all kinds of questions, and people are really excited. So I wanted to say that, just as I am, because of the fact that again, it had been years. I was wondering, where you were, and it took one of our elders more or less to point me in a direction. So definitely we're grateful for your work, past and present. Another question that I wanted to ask you about is in regards to the Black Panther Party, because most folks, when they hear about the Black Panther Party, automatically they think of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale and their faction, which was which they put together in Oakland, California. Now, I understand that the Black Panther Party existed before October 1966. And I wanted to get some clarity from you because of the fact that there are a number of different folks who think that that's exactly when it started, and it's celebrated and it's commemorated quite often. And just for the record, if possible, I would like you to set the record straight just for just for clarity, so that we all will know.
Well, the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense was probably the third development of the Black Panther Party. All right. The first development was created by SNCC. It was called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and it used the symbol of the Black Panther. And, of course, the racist media called it the Black Panther Party. They had an independent primary, and which 900 people participated in Lowndes County. And in this period of time, representing the Revolutionary Action Movement, I wrote Stokely Carmichael, who was then chairman of SNCC, asking him that we were meeting in Harlem. Queen Mother Moore would have what she called a Black Nationalist Forum. And there was about 20 or 30 young men and about equal number of women who were around this forum. And I think it was at the either the YWCA or I think it was the YMCA on 135th and off of, I guess it was then called Lenox. And so we would meet Friday nights. So we were talking about forming an independent Black political party. So I wrote Stokely and asked him if we could use the Black Panther, and that the New York branch would be the supportive branch of the Lowndes County branch, right? You know, I mean, we'd raise funds, we'd mobilize and everything in conjunction with what SNCC was doing. So Sam Anderson, who's still in New York, you know, can verify this because he was in SNCC, but he was in the New York Black Panther Party too. And also Ted Wilson. So Stokely came, well, Kwame Ture now, came to New York, and we had meetings, right? I don't know whose apartment Sam would probably remember, or Ted would probably remember, in a brother's apartment. And we discussed, we were involved in a school boycott. And the community group was involved in a school boycott to get Black history or more what was called a relevant curriculum, you know, to more relevant to the African American community. And so we discussed with Stokely of a broad coalition that the Black Panther Party would be the forum that organizers, all organizers, could work with and try to get African American political representation. Right? It was so broad that we had met, had a meeting, a mass meeting in Adam Clayton Powell's church. Some of the guys went to Washington, and Adam Clayton Powell said we had the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and now we had the Black Panther Party. Right? You know, so I mean, like, that's how broad it was. You know, so and so chapters were established in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago, and the Bay Area, and Los Angeles. I don't know where else. Now, Bob Brown could probably tell you where else, right? And so Stokely, I saw Stokely on the street one day, and he said that, you know, it was this guy, Huey Newton, and who wanted this. He had problems with the Bay Area, you know, with Mamadou Lumumba, who was our person out there. And they had formed the Black Panther Party of Northern California. And so he and Bobby, you know, formed the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense. And so I didn't have contact. You know, Stokely had contact with the West Coast. You know, so, you know, I guess the rest is history that they had near shootouts from what I found out later. And so the Northern Black Panther Party of Northern California dissolved when Huey sent Bobby to the state capitol.
Okay.
Right. And they walked into the chamber with guns. Now, having worked with Malcolm on the East Coast, and, you know, I mean, like, all the problems that, you know, I mean, he had to take his men, you know, and not display guns because, you know, a lot of his men got busted because they had felonies and stuff like this, and you couldn't go around on the East Coast like you could go around on the West Coast.
Right.
But I knew from my limited study, right, And I had been trained by Queen Mother Audley Moore that any time any men outside of the police or army of the state, you know, anybody outside of that march on any kind of governmental apparatus, you will have trouble.
Right.
Right. So I called out to Mamadou and asked him what was he doing, and he told me that it wasn't him. Right. And so I suggested to him to cease functioning publicly as the Black Panther Party of Northern California.
Okay. So it was a tactical move.
Yeah, right. So we, in other places, stopped using the name Black Panther Party. Though we supported the concept, we just, would use another name or, have a different organization. So we formed the Black Guards in 67, but it was the same people who were doing all this, so.
Right.
So it was tactful, not to, we supported the brothers, and I think we helped some, survive, and but from that point on, they came after every black revolutionary in the country.
Right. I wanna talk a little bit about COINTELPRO, because I know that in the COINTELPRO papers under J. Edgar Hoover, I know when they talked about their 5 main points, and they spoke about stopping the rise of the Black Messiah, and by name they mentioned certain people. They mentioned Elijah Muhammad, they mentioned Malcolm X, they mentioned H. Rap Brown, they mentioned Jamal Alameen, and they mentioned Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and they mentioned yourself. I find it odd that when I talk to folks who are in movement and struggle and they don't know your history, I find it odd because of the fact that for J. Edgar Hoover and those folks to name you in these documents as one of the main people that they wanted to stop, it seems that they knew your value to our community more than some of our people knew, which is sometimes we find that, in a lot of cases, just, growing up and struggling myself, I understand that in many cases, some of the folks whose name are least known did more for our people than some of the folks whose names are in lights. I wanted to ask you in regards to COINTELPRO. I know that, folks talk about, it stopped and after the church committee and all that type of stuff. As you see it, what are some of the ways that COINTELPRO affected you then, and are you still feeling an impact from it today in 2010? And also, how do you see it playing out these days, if you do see it playing out?
Yeah, well, I don't want to go into all that, but of course, it's still playing out. It's still playing out, and I think more people around the country, and they're probably older, understand what I have done, or contributed,
Right.
But most people right here in my own hometown in Philadelphia, know very little about me. And, the state is very good at marginalizing me and making me an enigma, because Yeah, I don't use drugs, I don't drink alcohol, and being a Muslim and who, has, I don't accept money for, any non-principal thing.
Right.
I don't fit into a lot of the quasi-establishment, even grassroots groups who, secretly sell out. Right.
Right.
And so I try to advise or, work with young folks, who have not, been corrupted. And there's a real gangster mentality in Philadelphia. And the movement has been set back. So, I have an extended family, and that's what keeps me going. My own personal family has been wrecked, continuously, so, I'm not one who necessarily, needs money, I need enough to survive, right? And I mean, the rest should go to the movement, so, a lot of folks in my own family, that's not their orientation.
Right.
And so, they think I'm crazy, for being this way. But I talked to Ella Baker, right, before she passed, right? And she said, she was living in Harlem in a apartment complex. I said, do people realize, Miss Baker, how much you contribute? She said, most of the people, my peers think I was crazy. I didn't, get any money. Right? And there's, like, as many people as she helped, right? Look at Mrs. Rosa Parks. She didn't pass being a millionaire, right? Look what she contributed, So, Robert Williams, Robert and Mabel Williams is barely, if you want to raise some money for Queen Mother Mabel Williams, in Baldwin, Michigan. People are still, barely making it, right? Who contribute significantly to the struggle, So, and they have marginalized those freedom fighters, right? Who, really contribute, And I think you can go to any community, and I go to Mississippi sometimes. They have the Veterans of the Mississippi Freedom Movement, and I don't see them guys rich. They ain't rich, and the sisters, they're not rich, but they still try.
Do you think that's an effort? I'm sure it is, but do you think it's an effort to more or less throw the youth off course? Because right now with capitalism, they teach you just get money and die trying or whatever, quote unquote.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
And then they see the freedom fighters living check to check or less. You know what I mean? So it kind of discourages them. What would be your advice for the youth right now? If you was to say, okay, boom, based on the lessons learned from during the '60s era, what would you have changed, or what would you suggest that more or less youngsters today not do that may have been done?
So they don't have to become known the way we became known. Okay. If I had it to do over again, nobody would have ever known me. But And they knew that's what I was trying to do. Yeah. The only reason why people really found out anything about me was that when I was incarcerated, people had to educate people to raise money to eventually get me out of prison.
Right.
But I would say, pick your battles, pace yourself, and that let me come back to this. Can I come back to this?
Right.
I need to be excused for a second, all right?
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna take a break real quick. And we're live with Muhammad Ahmad, formerly Max Stanford, from the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM.
May appear a confusing blur of activity, each ant doing its own thing, but it can't be. Somehow the ants coordinate their actions so that large insects are overwhelmed, killed and carried back to the base.
Peers is dying and my people are suffering. The money's still low, you should see how they budgeting.
Watch what comes out your mouth.
People are suffering. It's elementary, they want us all gone eventually. Peers is dying, people are suffering. The money's still low, you should see how they budgeting. Peers is dying and my people are suffering. Cause the money's still low, they want us all gone eventually.
I swear to God, living in this economy's like a robbery. The government taxing me when they owe me for my property. You niggas act like you happy to live in poverty. When I feel like a king, I gotta make these fools acknowledge me. I'm royalty and loyal to the feeling of it. The contrast make it look thuggish. We talk, walk, and look rugged naturally. Nothing sad to see, we all a part of this tragedy. I'm mad at you, so why you mad at me?
We headed for the times of the 9, watch out 6. Sun cycle on the rise, moon cycle out the mix. Living on this planet of the snakes and the crucifix. Pardon self as I unk my way through, marching with my A-boom boom, making my debut. Like great balls of fire, nothing could save you. In these replenishing times, I honor my dead, making my ancestors proud when it's off with your head.
Does my pencil possess potential to change mentals? Yes. Show what you pen in this pack with the essential less. What is essential to keep it as sharp as a ginsel? Yes. What is essential to keep it like a temple? Blast, alter the temple, keeping the beat simple and fresh. While they whimper and rest, I'm intuition like the simplest gas. Into tradition, I'm on a mission until I transition to give the up and coming a better existence.
I seen a beggar scorn reaching for a coin or two. The older we get, it switches up the point of view. And they anointed you, leader of the free world. Desolate minds refined to the B-girl. The most benevolent is evident who I be. Graffiti on the wall, the crew drew Ali. Zoo true I key shifting on the paradigm. Raise the vibration, then go prepare the mind.
Define magnificent rare gem. Dig deep, the omnipotent all-seeing. I just peep the game plan. I pray for niggas, amen. Fat Sharpie, spray can, I'm made man. The suede vans, no street skate, no beat taking. For Pete's sake, he's a beast quaking, the scene shaking. No mistaking, the ants conquer the elephants. FTP, RBG, the rest development.
What's the ant's secret that makes them the most efficient predators on Earth, consuming more meat than lions, tigers, and wolves combined?
I'm way medicated, puff lion, lace sedated, and stay dedicated to culture that created the essence of the lessons now delivered in my presence. Kalonji called upon me, so now I pose the question: how is it that the blacks came in whips and chains, having nothing else to lose and everything to gain? Now niggas entertain for some whips and chains, a white dame and some fame. Is that shit not strange?
It's kinda hard holding down your dreams when you blacking in America with institutions set to bury you 6 feet underneath dirt but depth deep. Disciples psychological when making those ends meet and needs be. A hand feeds the other teasers. Gather thoughts, grab the Gatling for good reason. In between success, devil's greed, a pine box, a mind jogs elusive.
And why I come off and camouflage, can't take cloth. Eating lentils and vegetable broth, but I ain't never been soft. Leading the lost and forsaken by any cost. Bones aching, working hard, trying to bring home the turkey bacon, breaking laws of gravity. Fuck with the family and watch me savagely crush craniums and chest cavities to pray for the casualties. Cause my anatomy is naturally, casually composed. This is so self-construction for the soul.
I'm black dynamite, I'll blast you with my nitro. Spit a dope piece with a gold piece in a boot with 5 disciples. We channeling boot mind, the revolution sparker. With an 8-bar cigar smoking some dark room on the altar. Watch the daughter work a mojo, walk the stage without a hype man. Electric verses turn the great crowd into light rain. Flood psyches with an ill beat and some brain food that's got hot. Fly wisdom, call Starseed the enlightener, that's side rock.
2012 and times are different yet the same. Nowadays the number of prisoners behind the cage outnumber amounts of those enslaved during the trades. And shit, we killing ourselves over what set you blame. Getting shot instead of hang. Nothing changed for the better except the cheddar of corporate profit to gain. The more money in pocket, the more people in chains. Unite niggas who bang, destroy their main aim.
It's all connected, form a web like a Nazi. It's the people, Siafu is the army. Start a top contender, royal plots a new agenda. They even breathe on the track, sucker MC for dinner. All that garbage I penning, this right here's the ending. Words the venom, getting them wrapped in Egyptian linen. Coming for head, this rapper, Kali will shake the rafters. Only thing standing after, walking natural disaster, rapture.
I'm your brother Kalonji Jama Changa of the FTP movement, and we're live and direct with a man with a plan, none other than Muhammad Ahmad, formerly known as Max Stanford from RAM, the Revolutionary Action Movement, amongst other formations. How you doing, brother? We back live, or how you feeling right now?
Oh, fine, brother. Fine.
Okay, right on, right on. I know we had mentioned before we went to a break a few steps back. You had mentioned Queen Mother Moore. I understand that you had a good relationship with Queen Mother Moore. Can you for folks who don't know who Queen Mother Moore is, because there are some folks that are listening right now that I know personally that are somewhat apolitical, but they're interested in learning as much as possible, and they're hitting me up right now. Can you give us a little briefing on who Queen Mother Moore was and who she was to you and who she is to you?
Well, Queen Mother Moore became active in the Garvey movement in the 1920s. She and her 2 sisters moved from Louisiana to New York, eventually to New York. They traveled around the country. And then Queen Mother Moore joined the American Communist Party and was a leader in the New York division of the American Communist Party, especially Harlem. And in 1950, she resigned from the American Communist Party. And she taught us that she felt that the real communists had been either kicked out the country or killed in the early period, and that the party had been so infiltrated that it was actually controlled by other people. And she left the Communist Party, disillusioned. And one of the reasons why she left the Communist Party is she asked for a conference meeting on African liberation. And they had her wait, and this is a African American woman, a black woman. They had her wait for 5 hours in an alley in Harlem. And she said after 5 hours, she realized that they weren't going to they weren't serious about, discussing it with her. Went home and threw up, and her younger sister Eloise nursed her back to health, and she then became active in the nationalist movement. Well, it just so happens that Queen Mother was in Philadelphia at the time that we were organizing, and that Azalea Johnson, who had been Robert F. Williams and Mabel Williams' co-worker, who had lived next door to Robert and Mabel, who developed us. I mean, that's why we developed so fast, was because of Azalea, She sat on the Central Committee, and advised us, And so she was in a study group with Queen Mother Moore, and we would go over to Queen Mother Moore's house. First, I was scared to death of Queen Mother, and because that I had been programmed, by the society that communists could manipulate your mind, right? So right. And I didn't want to have nothing to do with Queen Mother because she had been in the Communist Party, right? Right. And Queen Mother, I don't know if she would be devilish or, or if she was sincere, but, we'd be in a group after the meeting in a house, and she said, darling, you're the one I want. And I say, I'd tell one, come on, let's go. Right. I'd be going, right? But Queen Mother said, anytime that you want to come by, my study, the window in my study on our porch is open. All you have to do is raise it, and come in. I don't know why she told me. So one day I was walking past Queen Mother's house. Something say, go and see if the window's open. I opened the window, went in. Queen Mother had newspaper clippings from 1933 to the present, all laid out chronologically, right? On the floor. Wow. So I just, this was history. It just blew me away. I stayed there hours. I ended up staying the whole weekend with Queen Mother, right? And then, as Lee said, that, before I leave, and she had to go back to Monroe, North Carolina to deal with some things, I'm going to give you another teacher, right? And she introduced me to Queen Mother, and so Queen Mother actually, she's the reason why I am still alive today. Right? She was a magnetic mass speaker, but personally, if you get her, one or two or small groups, she was very good. She was in political education. She was very politically sophisticated from all those years. And she would give us material to study, and, so she became my second mother. In fact, Queen Mother went to my mother, right? She told me this later. She went to my mother and told my mother about me. I don't know. My mother never really talked about the conversation, and that's all that Queen Mother told me. But I know that when the feds came to question my mother, that my mother chased the feds out of the house. Right? So whatever Queen Mother had said was effective, right? So, right. And she nurtured me, and I would bring people to her, and people would visit her. Women would come, spend weekends with Queen Mother, and I mean, she nurtured a whole generation. You know, I mean,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 That right there. I have, like I said, I'm getting, we're running out of time, but I'm getting so many emails and Facebook messages, and they're hitting us up on our site right now, which is great because folks are listening. And I know that.
Any questions? Oh well, I guess we're out of time. But if folks had any questions, I would,
right. I'm gonna. Well, I'm gonna ask you one that this brother I just see hit me up with. And I mean, if you can answer that within 3 minutes, if possible.
Okay.
He wanted to. He asked me to ask you to define revolutionary black nationalism from your definition or your perspective, more.
Well, revolutionary black nationalism is, I would say, I would call it revolutionary African American internationalism in this point in time, because it's about that of uniting or working to organize the working class of the African American community, which 90% of us are workers, and mobilizing, organizing, mobilizing, and educating, politically educating the working class to develop the indigenous leadership that's already there, right? And to, if possible, form mass organizations or mass membership organizations, eventually of people that you groom or create a process that you bring that indigenous leadership forth and work with them. All right. And so that's the concept of revolutionary black nationalism, is that you're working with your people. If you're African American, you're working with African Americans, and African Americans, we have found over the last 50 years, work better with African Americans, right? Just as Hispanics work better with Hispanics, right? That doesn't mean you don't like Hispanics, right? You know what I mean? I don't know Spanish as good as Hispanics, our condition. So you are familiar with your conditions. So you work with your people, right, to unite with other people once you get organized. All right. And Malcolm said the problem is we work with other people before we get organized. All right. So he said there can't be any working class solidarity until there's first black unity. That doesn't mean that's everybody in the black community you won't be able to unite with, but you can unite with the majority that's living poor. All right. And the ability to organize them. So, and when you look at, if you go around the world, you look at the conditions that the black working class lives under, it is similar that people all around the whole third world, Africa, Asia, and Latin America live. All right. So it means we're in unity with them. Doesn't mean that we don't like white workers. Right. The white workers got to find out that we're not the enemy, and when they're willing to unite with us, we'll unite with them, right? No, whoever, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a whole lot of sense. Like Imam Jamil said, if you can't beat yourself, you can't beat nobody else.
Right.
So I definitely dig that. Unfortunately, our time is about up. We got like a minute left. What can and we got to get you back on there, and that's not. I know a lot of times folks say, yeah, we got to get you back on the show. we will have you back on, inshallah. Like you know, the next time they got me, next time they give me some play up here. How can folks get in touch with you? Or do you have like any? Can they access you via online or a PO box or whatever?
Sure. You can contact me at PO Box 34463, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 1901 zip code.
Okay. Can you repeat it one more time?
PO Box 34463, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19101.
Okay.
My email is I don't know why I don't do much email, so don't necessarily response, right? But my email is, I'll read it. Right. MSTANFRD at Temple, TEMPLE.edu.
Right on.
My office number. Huh?
No, I was going to say we got to close out. We're going to get cut off because of the radio.
Okay.
Sure. We would definitely get back at you, and I'll make sure that we get everything repeated for you online. And
okay.
Again, we thank you. Thank you very much, brother, for being online with us.
Shukran for even asking me. Yeah.
So I will be in touch with you, brother.